it better. I'm so old school. I have to print out the whole thing to make notes.
All right, we do have enough for a quorum, so I am going to call this special meeting of the Board of Finance for the town of North Stonington to order, dated December 9th, 2020. And I'll call the time at 7:01. Just as a quick reminder, I'll go through roll call. This is a special meeting. We speak only to the agenda item that has been submitted. So we have present tonight myself, Dan Spring, as chair, Mike Anderson, Dan Smith, Carolyn Howell, Ann Aiken, and we have Brett Mastriani sitting in as alternate to Paul Simon. Sarah, I think, said she was going to be on. Is she on yet?
No, there's one person on the phone. I'm not familiar with the phone number, but I don't know if it's Sarah. Sarah, if it's you, if you can just unmute and tell us it's you.
All right, fine. We do have, as we move through this, we do have present Peter Nero. Is Deb Martin on, Christine?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not yet.
She plans on being on though, Peter?
I believe she will be believe she will be joining us.
Okay.
I am on the meeting.
Oh, great.
There's the phone number.
All right.
That's the phone number.
Great.
Right, thanks.
Good. And welcome. I see Bob Carlson and Nita Kincaid. So great. Our agenda item number 2 is the review and approval of the draft audit for the fiscal year 2019-20. Now, those materials were sent out last Friday for your review. I know it seemed like a lot, some that you may not understand, but I would preface by saying, in speaking to Sandy Wellwood, our auditing service, she said you had a very solid audit, and it's one that even was improved over the previous year, which she said was our best. So we have a string of just great audits, and as you know, the audit report is a very critical document for the benefit of the town. In speaking with her, and again, she apologizes for not making a presentation and answering questions. She is suffering from a case of bronchitis, a little bit better today, but her doctor has imposed more rest and limit talking. She gets through a sentence and then just starts coughing uncontrollably. So she said she would make herself available at a later date if it was requested to answer any questions or make statements relative to what we found in the audit. I will add that she was very appreciative of the response she got from our administrative team. That, as you recall, all of this was done remotely due to the pandemic. She just applauded their professionalism, their efficiency, and most importantly, their promptness in getting materials to her, which has led us to having the draft prior to the end of the year with the thought that it can be approved and submitted. Many towns are in extension simply because they have not been prompt or efficient and diligent in working with the remote situation. So she really sent strong congratulations and appreciation to our administrative team, to include Christine Diaz, Susan Pike, and Deb Martin. So, and again, from the Board of Finance, thank you all. So we'll open it up for questions. Christine has done a full review. I have looked at it. We'll answer the questions best we can. And then move to an approval. Brett, you're recognized.
I just have a quick question from this. Is this the one that we were expected to have an increased cost on due to COVID, or is that next year's? That she?
No, that has yet to be submitted to us. We were looking at an upper level of potentially 8,000. She did say in her statement to me that that would be significantly decreased because of the efficiency of our administrative staff. So
Okay.
there'll be a billing that will be a supplemental because of requirements to include COVID revenues, reimbursements from the state.
Okay.
And another point is guidance relative to that came very late from the state to our auditing service or anyone who was doing an audit. So everyone is still trying to play catch up in the circumstances of this pandemic.
Gotcha. Can you just touch base on when we look at revenues, what other is under revenues?
Can you tell me what page you're on, please?
Page 7. So we have licenses, fees, fines, charges, then other. And it looks like we were.
That's A5. So in the normal budget, other is A5. So property taxes is A1, interest and investment earnings is A2, intergovernmental is A3, licenses, fees, fines, and charges is A4, and other is A5. That includes sale of recyclables, transfer stickers, zoning enforcement officer, inland wetlands, planning and zoning, conservation commission, sale of vehicles, SCARA subsidy, contractors tipping fees, assessor's office, K-9 account, GIS services, fire marshal, property rent, PERMA insurance credit, sale of fixed assets, deobligated capital, miscellaneous, resident trooper ticket revenue, senior center, and zoning board of appeals.
Gotcha. So does that, is there anywhere to dive down to see what actually made that biggest dent in the 59,000?
The final profit and loss statement that you guys received a couple months ago, that has the line item detail in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I try to encourage you to do the review on the P&Ls on a monthly basis. They're given to you. But you're right, it's nice to get that correlation to the audit report. But as we received the draft last Wednesday, Christine and Susan Pike went through all of it to reconcile the numbers.
Thank you.
Ann, you had your hand up next. We're not hearing you, Ann.
Can you hear me now?
We got you now.
Excellent. I will say that this was an awful lot of material to review in just 5 days. There was close to 80 pages of it. So I wasn't able to do a really in-depth review of it, but I did come up with a couple of questions. The first one is on page 5, where it's talking about our net position.
And what's your question?
It says our net position decreased by over 2 million from last year, but the number for 2020 is greater than the number for 2019. So how is it a decrease?
I think, as I looked at it, we have reimbursement from the state that has not come in yet. Get a confirmation from Christine if she's following along.
I'm just double checking. And I think that you're looking at the, I think it continues on to page 6. So I think the number you're looking at is the total net position on the bottom of page 5, but it continues on to page 6 for more of the detail.
Okay.
Does that help? Because you're referring to the statement in the first sentence, correct? Under government-wide financial analysis?
Correct.
Right. So it's not just the information that's right below it on page 5. It continues into the information on page 6.
Okay. I'll have to see if I can put all of that together and make sense of it. All right, I had a second question, which is on page 7.
Yep.
The general fund, does that include our unassigned?
Yes, it
fund?
does.
It does, okay. All right, and the last question I had is on page 21. At the end of the first paragraph, it says the town has no allowance for uncollectible taxes and interest. Now, are they saying that because in our budget, we expect 95% or greater of our tax revenue to come in?
Yeah, we actually budget on 98.5, Ann, you recall?
All right. But that's why they're putting that statement in?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as we get through questions.
Good.
I think Carolyn Howell was up next, Brett. Carolyn, you're recognized.
Okay, I'm sorry. On page 49, I just had a question under miscellaneous income. What is that number made up of? It's short by $44,038. It's under SCRRA subsidy.
Right, so you want to know,
Like what is,
didn't come in that we hoped would come in?
so what is it that you were hoping would come in there?
We had budgeted, let me double check. I think we had budgeted to get the Eversource credit for both of the school projects, and one of them didn't come in last fiscal year, but let me just double check and open it up. Yes, we had anticipated the Eversource credit for the elementary school coming in. That did not come in last fiscal year. That actually hasn't even come in yet. So we should be expecting that sometime, I'm hoping within the next 2-3 months.
So you're expecting the shortfall of 44,000, or what is it that you're expecting?
We had estimated $50,000. We won't know exactly what the credit is. It has to do with calculations done by the company on the energy efficiency of the new building. So,
Okay.
And how are you monitoring those assets flowing to us, Christine? Do you contact them on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, or what?
I will reach out tomorrow.
Thank you.
So it's a lump sum payment that comes in. We didn't get the first payment until much after for the middle high school. So that's why.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I just wanted everyone to have some sense of anticipation. Yeah.
It will come this fiscal year.
Brett, we're back to you.
So if I look at page 3, for instance, so right now, or the unassigned fund, we're up to 18.3 compared to 15.7 last year. Do I have last year's numbers correct? I got that from the states. listing.
That is correct. And because we show the give back, from budgets of that year, 2019-20, as we close out. But if you recall, and maybe you can give me the number if you remember, we did pull from the undesignated to mitigate taxes.
Right. So
Remember
that's
what that
not
number
in
was?
here. I don't off the top of it was
Roughly $440,000.
okay.
So it puts us back roughly at a 15.7.
All right. And then I guess back to my question from the last round, now that Carolyn pointed out that page 49. So the difference, the biggest difference in that revenue looks like the sale of a town vehicle. Was that the tanker truck that we didn't sell, or is that
Truck,
a different?
yes.
Is that still geared for sale?
Well, yes, but we're also waiting for the delivery of the new one. So
Okay.
there'll be a crossover there at some point.
We've asked the fire company to prepare a one sheet with pictures and the specifications of the truck so that we can start to gauge interest on it and have put the information out now with a anticipated delivery date of when we get the new truck.
Yeah, get some
All right.
prospects going. Yeah.
So it's not really a loss in revenue. Well, it is for that current year, but it's more of a push to.
Yeah, it got pushed into another year, Brett, is what happened. Yeah.
All right. That sounds better. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'd just like to point out a few things. I mean, Brett was kind enough to highlight the unassigned. Again, we're still at very favorable levels, in my opinion, in order to demonstrate that we have the ability to meet our operating expenses and have a level of liquidity. It's very important. Again, I just would reiterate, a lot of people talk, well, gee, why is the rainy day fund where it is? But it's showing strength to our fiscal management, and it's very important. And I know we're working on the unassigned fund policy, I think, which Dan submitted. We'll have a review of that next meeting. Again, I have to reiterate that the auditor said it was just a very solid report. And there was no management letter. If there's a discrepancy or something that she's concerned about, there'll be attached a management letter. And you really don't want a management letter. You want a clean audit. And that's exactly what this one has represented. If you go to page 8 of the audit, again, under economic factors in next year's budget, it talks about, the surplus that we have. But most importantly, I think it's important that in the audit, she makes comment that North Stonington experienced the fastest growth between 2010 and 2019, as reported by the Connecticut Town Economic Index. So, it's just suggesting that the town is on its way up. And for people who are coming to town, thinking about placing their business in town, this is the type of thing that they want to see. Besides the fiscal strength of the town, comments like this from our auditor is very positive. Caroline?
So at the bottom of page 8, it talks about the solar farm off of Ella Wheeler Road. It says it's broken ground, has not been begun construction, but it looks like they just completely stopped working there. What is going on with that?
I don't have an answer to that, but that's something we can have the selectmen talk to in our next meeting.
That's something that information would come from land use, because that's not a town project. That's a private project.
Well, it's included in this report. That's why I'm asking.
Those
No, I
are just
understand. I'm
fees.
just saying it's not a town funded project like the one we had talked about on Winnetonka Hill. It's a private development.
Okay.
Yeah, those were just permit fees, Carolyn. It's not the revenue from like the Winnetonka one that was potential.
That's
I was
correct.
just wondering what was going on with it. That's all.
If I can refer you to the supplementary, these are, it's unaudited information. So it's another, the second packet. So just a couple of things I just want to bring to your attention. So if you've got that, if you can go to page 64. You know, a major responsibility of the Board of Finance is debt management. And what is illustrated here is by statute, what our limits are for debt. And you should be, everyone should be familiar with that. And relative to the debt that the town is currently carrying, we are well below the ceiling presented by statute. So schools, for instance, for the budget that we present and the revenues demonstrated, we have a ceiling of $67 million. So, and again, we're well below that. And cumulatively, our debt levels could be higher, as you can see, based on sewer, renewal, pension deficits, et cetera.
Brett has a hand up, Dan.
I'm sorry, Brett, it was looking down. Go ahead.
No worries. Just on that page 63 where it talks about the Board of Education, under like replacement of equipment, and it shows the negative 127,000. What type of stuff is that? I'm just for educational purposes, if somebody can explain, because there's a lot of negatives in this on this page that if I can just get a quick explanation so I just have a better handle on it.
Well, we have Deb Martin present, so.
Right.
Are you with
Can you
us?
hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
very well,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure if Christine wanted to speak to this if she was on, but the 127,000, majority of that was for our Chromebooks.
Okay, and that's not relative to the ones or some of the reimbursement from the state, or is that shown somewhere? That's obviously shown somewhere else.
No, the reimbursements from the state or the computers from the state are not reflected in
Those
any
came
of those
later,
numbers.
and those are free.
Right,
Yeah, so
right.
So these
that
were purchases
reimbursement
we
you're
made
talking
last
about,
year.
Brett, is in fiscal year, this current fiscal year, not last year.
Yeah, the 308 that we received after is something that Christine will include next year as part of the town.
Okay, and what about the other at the end of that list?
I don't have my list in front of me. I apologize for that, but the other.
It's 133,725.
I can look at that when I get back into the office to review and see what that is consisted of.
Deb, that sounds like the number that we put into the non-lapsing fund. Does that sound about right?
Well, we had 128,000 and change that was still remaining in our budget, and then we had the reimbursed piece from the town at 9,000. So that could be a majority of that. Yes.
Yeah. So Brett, I'm gonna guess that that's how the auditor chose to designate
Yeah.
the amount that was going into
Right.
the non-lapsing.
Yeah, I would agree with that, I think.
Because we don't
Target.
generally have other.
Yeah.
That may just be the outstanding balance at the end of the year.
Okay, and then the central office, 61,712. What's considered? I know what the central office is, but what's considered in that kind of line item?
Well,
And
that would include our insurance. It would include our sub-service with Kelly Services. It includes the financial system that we ended up putting a large chunk toward as the initial payment for last year. So that number, that constituted a large percentage of the overage in that line.
I think that was it on that I had on that other. Oh, the utilities. Is that for the current building as well as the admin building and the? Obviously, I guess the elementary school was in the middle school at that point. So is that just overages?
That's all the locations. That's all locations. 298, the new Wheeler building, and primarily just 298, the building the central office is currently in, as well as the new Wheeler building. The elementary school, that was through March of the prior year, and they were closed until March of this year. So, well, April actually, I believe. So we only have a couple of months through the remainder of the fiscal year that are reflected in there for the elementary building.
All right. And do you think that was just for having extra buildings, or is that just increases in those utilities?
Well, it was a combination of both. It would have been a few months of the extra, and then Wheeler, the new building, was a little higher than anticipated. We didn't have any solar offset at that point, so we do believe that we'll experience a lesser rate this year overall, now that solar has been connected.
Oh, great. And then on the positive side, the difference between the teachers first, and then I'll just ask a question, then you can respond. And then the transportation, is that the savings in the busing after COVID started?
Substantial portion of that, yes, was the savings in the general transportation to and from home. And then there was several sports that were canceled in the spring that also had no transportation allocated as budgeted. And then as for the teacher savings that we experienced last year, we had several staff that had changed after the start or after the budget had gone through. So I believe we had 5 that had either retired or resigned, and the replacement staff was at a much lesser rate.
Very good.
We experienced some cost savings there as well.
I just want to point out on the transportation too, to keep in mind that is a contract. So the savings that we see on the transportation will not be always real dollar savings. It's negotiated with the bus company as to how much of our contract we have to fulfill. So it's a different number than what you might think.
Okay.
All right, because of the contract.
And then going forward, if the other at that bottom line item is part of the reserve account, would that change going forward on these reports? Will that be considered?
Brett, once that money is recognized as the non-lapsing, it moves into a non-recurring fund within the town side. So it'll only show up for that year how much is being moved to it. It's not going to be cumulative.
Okay, but I mean, will it show? Will it be labeled as that for future years? You think?
That's up to the auditor. I think she did it this way because this was the best way with the state to do it. But we can check with her.
Okay, I just think for people looking at it, it makes sense if it's clear. But thank you. I appreciate all the answers.
Yeah, and that's something that, can, I'm sure, be relabeled, Brett. And I know in your questions to this, you weren't with us as we closed out the last fiscal year. So, Carolyn, you have a question?
Deb, what are the maintenance services? What are those?
That would include most of our alarm systems, our fire extinguishers. It includes the service to our telephones. It might include service to the elevators. There are a number of services that we have our HVAC system. They're all on scheduled maintenance throughout the year, and certain preventative maintenance that has to be done, and that's all included in that line.
So
Can I-
it was under budgeted by 75,000, almost 76,000. Is that correct?
Well, those would also include, within that line would also include things that are not covered under the service contract, and that's what may have put us over. We did have several expenses at the new Wheeler High School last year that were not budgeted or accounted for, that arose after the project had been turned over to the school.
And what were those?
Peter, do you recall some of the bigger ones?
Hold on. Yeah, we had to do some work on plumbing and whatnot. I'm not sure if that's what we're talking about right now. We had some issues with that weren't included in the project once it was turned over to us, that we had issues with that we had to correct.
Plumbing was a very large portion, a very large piece. Yeah.
So the plumbing in the old Wheeler, while they did plumbing work in the original gymatorium, Carolyn, they did not do any of the underground plumbing work, and there, because the building was dormant for a period of time, and the plumbing wasn't used, we had to put in an injector system to help pump the waste out of the bathrooms and the shower areas. So that was a big chunk.
And if I can just tag on that, we're currently working on, Carolyn, to let you know, now with the new buildings being completed, we're looking through all the warranties to figure out what the service contracts need to be and what service needs to be completed on an annual basis, so that we are staying on top of that and making sure that we're following up with all of that to keep our warranties sound. So we're currently, we have a finance and facilities committee meeting next week, and that's one of the tasks that we're trying to put together, is a full manual of what services need to be done, because while they're new buildings, they need maintenance. So they'll need to have servicing done on an annual basis. So we are working on putting that together so that we can have that as part of the budget for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Brett.
Sorry, one last thing. What was the biggest savings with the employee benefits? Was that just through the attrition, or is that something you guys did to save on those benefits?
No, that was
91,980.
right. Along with, we did take on a lot of newer staff that did not require benefits, that replaced staff that had either couple or some that even had family.
So
that's savings.
We did put some contractual language in that allowed us, in terms of covering classes and whatnot, so we used less substitutes. But to be honest with you, Brett, because last year was an anomaly and we got out in March, we won't know exactly, what that number will look like whenever we go back full, what that's going to look like. But we did, Christine and Deb were both on negotiations. We did a lot of things to make sure that we could cover within our building, as to not to hit our substitutes and things of that nature. So that might have helped on, for example, when you look at central administration, what the cost for substitutes were.
Yeah, no, I believe he was in referencing the health insurance. Is that correct, Brett?
Yeah,
the health,
employee benefits was the 91.
Yeah, that was right. That was mainly due to the changeover in staff, the newer staff coming on, not requiring the benefits of the former staff.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, if I can refer you to page 65 of the supplementary. What we're looking at here is taxes that were collected, and as we go to the far right, you'll see taxes that were not collected. And we had a big bump in 2019-20, as you can see. And the majority of that, about 190,000 worth, is real estate. The rest is vehicles and RVs and that sort of thing. But my point, coming down to the bottom, we have 422,000 uncollected. And that has gotten better from where we have been historically. I know you get the tax reports, but that number needs to come down. That number represents almost $1 million, and it represents almost a number that we took from the unassigned to mitigate taxes. So, you know, and we'll talk through Christine Diaz to the tax collector, but we need to set a goal of at least half of that, you know, to really get a squeeze on recovering those revenues. Caroline?
I think that kind of speaks to the situation in the private sector where people are really struggling. There's a lot of people that are unemployed, and I haven't had a chance to research it, but I thought I heard on the news last night that Mohegan and, you know, Mesh and Tickets were going to be laying off again, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, that's going to add to the struggle that people are having to pay for their insurance and, you know, whatever else. Unemployment obviously doesn't cover everything.
Right. Well, I would be hopeful that, you know, the pandemic is a transitory event, not over yet. Thankfully, the FDA will vote on distribution of, I think, the Pfizer vaccine tomorrow, so that we will start to see distribution of the vaccine. So it's going to take a while for it to trickle down, but hopefully, as we enter the second half of 2021, things are going to be looking better. But that's an important number for us to continue to take a look at. You know, everything that we do and what is expected for the efficient running function of the town depends on those revenues. And we've calculated our budget on, again, that 98.5. So, Ann?
Well, that sort of raises the question of, for this coming budget season, do we drop our expectations from 98.5 to something less?
Yeah, I think that's something that we will talk about, you know, coming up. But it's one of the reasons why I wanted to point this out. And this is an important number that we don't need to have ascend. We need it for it to decrease. So something to potentially consider in our planning for the next budget year.
I would just point out on page 7 that we actually collected more taxes than we budgeted to collect in this budget that we're looking at, in this audit that we're looking at right now. So I don't necessarily know that you want to decrease that. The amount of uncollected taxes for fiscal year 20 is actually less than it was for fiscal year 19 overall. So while it is still a big number, and yes, we will definitely do as much as we can to decrease it, we're actually better than we were last year.
Yeah, my point is we got to keep the eye on the ball.
Yep.
And most important. But again, I would have to reiterate very strong report according to our auditing services. Dan Smith?
So a lot of these taxes from like 2004, 2008, would it be safe to say that this is probably dead taxes where we're never going to be able to collect that?
Yeah, if you recall, we go through a suspense list each year where, and it's minimal. I think the last one was roughly $5,000.
Yeah.
You know, where everything has been expended relative to trying to collect it. Some cases it's people who have moved away, some people who have taken their plates off their vehicles, you know, or transferred ownership. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have gone on, but it's difficult to get to that 100%. And the role of the tax collector is one where it has to be all business. I don't know how else to put it, and that we have to stick to what has been mandated and levied. So. All right. What I'd like to do is have entertain a motion for the approval of the draft audit.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second to
Second.
Brett? Dan
Second.
Smith? Okay, any further discussion at this point?
I just wanted to remind everybody that prior year audits are posted on our website under the Board of Finance page. Prior annual reports and prior audits are up there. So in case anybody's looking for historical data, it is on the website.
Okay, if I can.
Question that I didn't think of. Is there anywhere in here that talks about our assets in terms of our vacant land and stuff like that the town owns?
I don't think so.
No.
Do we track that at all?
I have, and I would tell you more than once, I have brought it forward to say, we are not in the business of managing real estate. Unless it's going to be used for the benefit of the community at large, why are we holding real estate? It's taking it off the grand list.
Right.
So,
Well, I just think if we talk about assets of the community, that's an asset, and we don't have it anywhere on a record like this. Which
it's
I
not
find
on the
odd.
grand list because it's not taxed, Brett.
Right.
Gotcha.
It's like ghost assets.
Okay.
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, when you see like states like New Hampshire, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, where they have no state income tax, pretty much all the land is privately owned and taxed. That is their source of income is, property taxes. And when you start putting land away and it's not being taxed, you can't collect tax, you can't collect revenue. So like you said, you have to find a balance for that.
Yeah, and some of the biggest things are the Winterchog property, and off of North Main Street, we got 3 prime building lots.
Right. It just would be nice to be able to see. I know they're not taxed, but there's got to be a value attached to them in some way that we can have a listing so we know what those are just for.
We have a listing of the properties. We have not put a valuation to them because they're not taxed unless something came forward where in a town meeting, we propose sale of those properties. We would have assessments at that point on those properties.
So it does nothing for our financial standing to have a certain amount of land assets.
No, it's one of my pet peeves that I've introduced maybe 3 times over my 10 years and gotten nowhere. And, we need some cooperation or better conceptualization or presentation on what could be done. Winterchog in particular, that was property that was gifted to the town. And there was resistance by village citizens relative to doing anything with the 3 building lots.
Okay. So on top of that, so say the middle school, or the old middle school, which is town property, when a private entity rents that, is there any tax associated with that other than personal property tax?
Their equipment is taxed and we pick up a revenue stream.
So it still stays
It's still a town asset.
building and for tax purposes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Dan Smith.
What about when we donate or take part in the sale or to Avalonia, places like that?
Again, whatever we gift to Avalonia is not going to show up as an asset.
So each time we gift them property or we assist in the sale of the property, it comes completely off the tax rolls, correct?
That's exactly right. So, conservation, our committee on conservation would merit that, we need it for open space, for trails, for enjoyment of our constituents. So, all right, if I can poll you, I'll start with Mike Anderson, yay or nay?
Yay.
Dan Smith,
Yay.
Carolyn Howell,
Yay.
Ann Aiken,
Yay.
Brett Mastriani,
Yay.
and myself, yay. So it's unanimous, a 6-0-0. And we will notify Christine, if you'll help me with that, our auditing service, so they can do a final and do a print. Bound copies will come to the town, and there will be a filing before the end of the calendar year to the state. Thank you very much for that, folks. Next on our agenda is public comments relative to the agenda item only, please.
Christine Wagner, I have a public question.
Yes.
Do you know what the surrounding communities around us or communities relative to our size collect in taxes as a percentage? I mean, to me, 95% seems pretty good. And like you said, even in a pandemic, we were collecting more last year than we did in the year prior. So I was just curious if you knew what the average is or what surrounding towns are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I always ask that relative to towns that our auditing service does serve. Preston is one of them. And there are some towns where it's abysmal, literally. And that, to expect anything less than 99% should not be acceptable, according to her standards.
So 99% is what towns around us are seeing, and we're not collecting.
No, what
to
I'm
par?
saying is some towns are not well managed, Christine, and are collecting less on their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, so that's a hard thing to do a comparative with. In order to have a fully executed budget as we proposed, we need at least 98.5, and we should strive to 100%. And our auditing service says, look, to think of anything less than 99%, you're doing yourself a disservice.
No, I understand the auditing service, but I was just looking at the reality and what's really happening in other towns and everything. I mean, I know what our auditing service says, but I was just curious what the reality of, like you said, a Preston or a Voluntown or a Ledyard or some of those other towns, what they're actually getting in.
Some towns that I know of are behind. So,
Okay.
They may be at 90%, they may be at 95%. So they're really not getting a fully executed budget.
Okay, thank you.
So it would result in, for all intent purposes, a downturn in budget planning if that were the case.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I was just curious what kind of the realities were out there. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
We have a hand up from Joe Gross.
Joe Gross, please. And good evening.
You just need to unmute yourself, Joe.
All right, I'm all set. Well,
Yeah,
Yes.
you're good.
Go ahead.
You muted yourself again.
okay now.
Now
Got you,
good.
Joe.
Yeah, Dan, I got 3 items. I got 1 question and 2 comments, if I may, please. My
Can you
first
bring
comment is,
Joe, can you bring your volume up a little bit so we can hear you better?
it's me with my new thing here, my daughter got me.
All right, if not, we'll do the best we can.
How's that? Better?
Yeah, just stay close to where you are. Don't lean back.
Okay. The questions asked by the board members tonight, I think this is one of the first meetings I've had where they asked these questions in the audit. So I think there's very good participation. My first question is, the undesignated fund balance, we talking 18% met, What is the percent that the auditors recommended?
She thought at 18% is exactly where we should be.
And if I may, I'd like to just answer to Brett one of his questions, please. The untaxable land, there is a report on it, and it identifies all the untaxable land we have in town. Avalon, the town, the state, the Grange, and we're talking millions. Brett, it's available. If I had 5 minutes, I could get last year's total figures, but I haven't done this year's yet. It's there. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And Joe is correct. I mean, the listing of that is available. And unfortunately, a lot of it is land that I would say is not marketable. There's slivers of this and slivers of that. But there are other pieces there that certainly would represent assets that could be added.
The town has a lot of little chunks of land in here, which is unmarketable. I agree. And we should get rid of it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm done. Thank you, Dan.
Joe, thank you for your contribution as always. Christine, do we have any other public comments?
The only other public on are the selectmen, so I don't think so.
The selectmen are free to make comment at this point if they would like.
I think they're good.
Motion to adjourn?
They could say, hey, great job, looks good. Come on, let's keep
I
it
like that Brett
going.
just said motion to adjourn, though. That was good.
I did say motion to it, but
Great job. Great
before
job,
this,
Dan.
it sounds like the Board of Ed did better this year. Weren't there some concerns last year? And this year it was smooth.
That was in the discussion period, Brett, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying it looks good too.
All
But
right, I would have,
did make a motion
I would
to-
move to adjourn. Do I
Second,
have a second to the adjournment?
second,
Ann. All right, I'm going to take that it's unanimous, if that's okay. And I thank you all. We'll see you next week, and I would take the time at 7:53. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution,
Good night.
and we'll see you next week.
Have a great night. Take care.
thank you. Good night.
Hey, John Boy.